Okay, Kristin, take the floor.
All righty. So let me know, is that all good?
Looks great.
Thanks, Simon. All right, so USDN, based on the network presentations we've had this far, I have to say I think USDN is a little bit different. So we are a practitioner network, and before we get started, I just want to do a couple things. Is first to acknowledge the land I'm standing on right now, which is the Piscataway and the Tango people and tribes who were united in this region before the colonizers arrived. And I just want to acknowledge the painful history of genocide and the forced removal from this territory, and honor and respect the many diverse indigenous peoples still connected to this land and that I stand on and that I'm presenting to you from today. I also want to acknowledge that I am a white woman and that I am privileged based on my skin color and my education and my position. So my privilege is essentially this unearned advantage of having my white skin, and it allows me privilege throughout everything and every sort of interaction that I have within the world. So this is something that I think is really important. Lastly, I want to just acknowledge that we're all human and we're experiencing a lot right now. It's a tremendously difficult time. And so just to thank you all for giving me time today, and to also acknowledge that you're doing an amazing job. So be kind to yourself in this. So who is USDN? Well, this is actually just a small fraction here, but USDN is a practitioner network. It's intended to fill the gap of the field of urban sustainability, where we have this pressure on these urban centers to drive forward progress on sustainability and climate action. And we have sustainability staff or climate staff or equity staff in these positions in government who are the change agents, who are charging forward to help with creating partnerships and create solutions and to help their residents essentially thrive despite our changing climate and other local challenges. So our network is a network of frontline practitioners, and they are working really, really hard with very little resources to do as much as they possibly can to acknowledge and change what's happening in the world today. In that, I'll just give a little bit of background on how USDN got started. So back in 2008, Chicago's first sustainability director was sitting there trying to think, what am I doing? What is my job? What am I supposed to be doing? I feel like I'm doing this all by myself. And so he called up two other friends that he knew from around the country who were also just beginning as sustainability directors, and requested some funding to come together and talk about what they were dealing with and what they were actually supposed to be doing. From that meeting, the USDN, the network, was born. And we keep growing both in sort of breadth and depth. And we keep growing together. So the thing to know about USDN is it is an entirely member-run network. The members identify what the challenges are, identify what their needs are, and then actually provide the governing elements of the network as well. They are our board members, they are our planning committee, they are the ones to determine how money flows throughout the network. So we have grown from 8 communities in 2008 to over 240 today. And we focus a lot on innovation, collective brainstorming, collective action, collective influence, and shifting of power. Essentially, I would say we're like the worker bees, learning from each other, working together, understanding that we need to unsilo in our municipalities and the work. And there are these really huge challenges in this field. And so our network is bringing together the brain power and has this dedication and really the big hearts of all these people to focus together on how they can help each other and help each other both behind the scenes, but also in person. So beyond being the worker bees, there's a really important component to note, and there's an intentional question mark here, that government itself, you know, in the United States at least, government was created to protect citizens. At that time, though, citizens were considered white male landowners. And so our systems and structures of government, all the way down to the local level, were designed to protect white male landowners. And in that, land and water were taken, stolen from Native tribes. People, especially slaves, were treated as property, and free and low-cost labor meant to only maximize profits. And based on this belief that men had superior knowledge, women were also treated as second-class citizens and as property. In that, those sort of mentality has been part of government, not just at the federal level, but all the way down to the local level as well. And it's permeated our policies and practices. So we used to say, well, government is actually, it's broken. It's a broken system. But unfortunately, it's actually designed this way, and it's functioning exactly as it was intended to function. And so what members in USDN are dedicated to doing is breaking down these systems and making them focused on corrective action, reparation for past harms, and changing the process, while also acknowledging that they're functioning within the system and functioning within these sort of elements that were founded on faulty assumptions. So that's a really key piece of the work at USDN and a foundational component to the network. Beyond the members, we have a very, very small and nimble staff. This is a whole set of program directors who are usually experienced and former USDN members themselves. I was actually a USDN member for 7 years before joining on as staff. And the staff play these sort of key leadership roles that are focused on equity, resilience, mobility, renewables, building energy, communications, and climate change. And even though we've chosen to kind of dedicate certain people to certain roles, like I'm the program director for resilience, there really is no guardrails necessarily. I work also a lot on racial equity and making big connections with greenhouse gas mitigation. So we are just giving members an opportunity to work with somebody who may have a little bit more experience and knowledge in a specific area to brainstorm solutions, to think about those challenges, and to know that somebody else has worked in the same space as them and faces those same challenges. So it enables staff to be these strategic thought partners with members. And then we also have a big support staff for all the online forum and online sort of connectivity that we do with members. But I think the big point here is actually we don't have very many people who are full-time staff. And so that's why this is such a member-led network. Members give hundreds and hundreds of hours to keeping this work going throughout the year. And they work with staff to do that. So I was asked to talk about where is USDN. We're everywhere in North America. And so, like I mentioned, we grew from 8 to 240 member communities, representing over roughly 100 million people, both in the US and Canada. And our average community size is actually getting smaller. So I think at the beginning we had the big cities, the New Yorks, the Chicagos, the San Franciscos. Now we're actually getting a lot more counties and smaller municipalities that are joining. And the average number of staff from each one of our cities is actually growing. So when a city joins USDN, it's not just the sustainability director that engages, it's any staff member from that municipality that can join and discuss and be part of the network. So we're seeing more people start to realize the value of the network and actively engage in the network. And the member interests are always driving our content. And so it's not just those core sustainability directors, but also the floodplain managers, the emergency managers, the tree stewards, others who are pushing forward what we focus our time and energy on. And we're seeing the increase in interest just based on the fact that it's been such an impactful network over the last decade. I will say we've also evolved. So, you know, we started with this idea of just getting people together to talk. And what we've seen in respect to members is in those early days, it was really focused a lot on the environmental side of sustainability. So pretty narrowly on greenhouse gas reduction. And over the past few years, we've seen a real big shift away from that and more at the intersection or the nexus of certainly mitigation work, but also resilience and making sure we're centering equity and prioritizing racial equity as the core foundation of all the work that we're doing. So we have more of a desire to work at the nexus, and the core foundation component of connecting people and forming relationships and enabling peer learning is still there. But we're also moving into more of an influential role where we're trying to actually influence things at other levels of government and with other partners and to generate new ideas together And then also to be pushing on other partners to say, we want to see things change more proactively. We want to get out of the react, respond, react, respond. So our staff is actually brand new. The programmatic staff is pretty brand new. And also this idea of influence at other levels is pretty brand new. I'm going to show a slide next that kind of, I was asked to talk about the mission and vision and theory of change. But I think even that is something that we adapt and have evolved, and it continues to change. So this is a slide that you're going to see the least amount of pictures and the most amount of text, because this is what I can say generally, that we're connecting and accelerating the pace of action, and that we're really looking at this way to have a low carbon future. But that this is evolving and changing, and we're moving forward on trying to be more influential as a large group of practitioners. So this gives you just an idea of how our members collaborate, and the pyramid is intentional because the bottom of the pyramid is essentially the foundational core of USDN. It's that connection of peers from other communities, the forming of relationships, the exchanging of information, and honestly, the stealing of ideas and using them. A lot of times we just are giving things behind the scenes to each other so that we don't have to spend time generating anything from scratch. It happens through a lot of our peer learning calls, our monthly meetings, and through our website. And so that remains the kind of core foundational component of USDN. Then our second layer of the pyramid is more about the intentional work that we do to help members learn and build capacity and to advance their work in establishing priorities. So it's a lot of the training and the capacity building, the sort of commissioning support for partners or from partners, and offering training on topics like renewable energy strategies, or how to write an RFP for procurement, or how to advance equity-related work in resilience. So that's sort of that middle piece. And then the top layer of the pyramid is more of the deep collaboration and collective work that the members engage with each other through USDN. So that's the innovation, the ideation, and the influence. How can we get to this sort of deep equity-centered policy ideas and the shifting of power? So those are our sort of areas. And the idea being that we influence each other, and we influence others outside of the network. What USDN does that I think is unique from other networks in a lot of ways is that we provide funding for our members to come back to the network with ideas. So they're able to come together and say, I have this really good idea. I think that it could really push things forward. And if I was able to sort of pilot it with a group of other cities, we could prove that it works in multiple areas, and then we can disseminate it to the rest of the network. So we provide funding in order for members to be able to do that. We also provide the direct coaching and support, which is how I spend a lot of my time in helping folks to operationalize a lot of the work that they're talking about. So instead of just saying shifting power, here's how you actually do it, and here's how we do it step by step in the process, and here's how we influence others within our cities to do so. And then we have these opportunities for gathering, which is changing a lot right now in this year, but members are still collaborating. They're collaborating online, they're coming together, they're identifying what's most important to them, and then they're finding others to help with that project and that pilot idea. So then they can, one of the requirements for all of our sort of elements is that it must be replicable and it must be shared with the other members. And the mechanisms that we use to do that is really beyond our staff. We collaborate with other partners. We have other sort of support networks for our members, but we also have what we call an innovation fund that is to fund just innovative, new sort of bold ideas. We have our Partners for Places, which is again bringing together a lot of different partners who can help on collective action. We have our peer learning exchanges, so folks who may all have accelerated in a certain space or want to learn more from a group that they've seen do really well, and so that we have those exchanges. And then we have those bigger, broader collective action groups. And this is just an example of the groups that we have going right now. So we have an entire financing resilience mini-series. We have an entire group dedicated to food waste. Certainly a lot related to renewable energy strategies and deep decarbonization. Right now, a lot with extreme heat and wildfires. And so these are not just set in stone, they evolve and change as the needs of our members do. And we do have a lot of value that comes from the network. We've had folks say, I would give up part of my salary before I would give up my membership in USDN because it helps me that much. So this is just there are members reporting a lot of value from these programmatic activities. There's a lot of new ideas that are coming forward, but also just this participation and sort of understanding you're not alone. There are people there to help you, that we can insist on transformational impact, and that there are ways to do so, and that it's not just, the silo that I think a lot of times people feel like they're in. So we've been doing a lot of leading through learning. And one of the core components of the center is that equity is the core of all of our work. Racial equity is actually the core of all of our work. And so it is actually mandated for USDN members to go through what we call an Equity Foundations training, which is a 5-part series on understanding racial equity. It also then dives into how racial equity has influenced the policies and practices within local governments. And we consider through all of our different learnings, a wide range of our different cities and counties and how they all have different political makeups, different histories, different types of support and funding, and different threats and hazards that they're impacted by. And so not creating these sort of one-size-fits-all frameworks, but instead offering these opportunities for adaptability and change and growth, and focusing on changing the norm, so evolving and growing through these multiple different pathways. But I think one of the key things is we're really focusing on recentering humans and treating humans as part of the ecosystem. This disconnect that I think happens a lot in cities where humans are considered different than nature or not part of the natural system. We're trying to really come back to part of, that seeing humans and sort of society as part of the natural ecosystem. I know that for all of you on this call, that's not a mystery or something that you don't think about, but a lot of times in cities, it's just a disconnect. The other thing I just want to acknowledge is that COVID has changed things drastically for cities. I'm grateful for our network because we're able to evolve and change pretty quickly. We've switched a lot to focusing on trauma and healing and supporting members through that, focusing on relationships. And since relationships were pretty strong, people have actually reached out to each other for just personal help, talking about some stuff that's not related to work at all. What do I do with my kids? Or do people have ideas? So we have a lot of chatter happening on the website. There's a big focus on meeting everybody's everyday needs first and foremost. So a lot of that response and recovery, but integrating it into a lot of the long-term sustainability work. And even though we have less in-person gathering, we have created this really good base of relationships. So members have actually stayed really, really engaged in the network and are still applying for funding and working on new emergent priorities and seeking new resources. But we do need to acknowledge that there's many layers to this crisis, and I think they're going to be cascading pretty soon and impacting local governments even worse. And that's first and foremost the budget deficits. A lot of local government budgets are being impacted right now. And just with all the other things that I talked about before, it's going to make a massive impact for keeping positions, keeping a lot of the momentum going, and unfortunately prioritizing the more proactive work in this space. So I want to talk about just kind of quickly some of the general themes, because to be honest with you, USDN is not a nature-based network. We're a network that does a lot of work with nature-based solutions, but I think we actually have a gap there that we want to do even more, which is exciting to be part of this network. We have more general themes that are looking at multiple sources, looking at multiple implementation partners, doing this sort of shifting away from the reactive and response into a more proactive space. We have traditionally, and I think this has happened in government throughout all levels of government, we're traditionally centering the hazards over humans. We're putting these, similar to the gray infrastructure projects over green, we put the hazard at the center of the planning and the work that we do, and we focused on the disruptions rather than the fact that we're thinking about enhancing human quality of life and thinking about the other components that make life livable and better. And so social connectivity, meeting everyday needs, thinking of all of our work is equity work, and equity is essentially our resilience and mitigation work. So making that shift, I did mention already a lot of the focus that we're doing on equity, but also recognizing for us that resilience, similar to sustainability, we know it's used in multiple ways. For us, not doing the bounce back, we're in no way where we want to be right now. So we're really focusing on this ability for our communities to anticipate and accommodate, but really focusing on this positively adapting and thriving, and that's enhancing quality of life. So looking at reliable systems, looking at economic vitality, thinking about that sort of three-legged stool and everything we're doing, but making sure it's grounded first and foremost in equity. And often when people talk about resilience, I know this image is used a lot for what's below the surface and bias and implicit bias. I'm saying right now, when we talk about equity, it's often just this baloney about bouncing back, and that's the top. And the reality is there's so much underneath that needs to happen, and we need to be thinking about communities and resilience year round, and that's kind of our point. So for us, we focus in shifting away from resilience and sustainability as these unknown concepts and bringing resilience into these different modes, thinking about it year-round, human-centered, saying that there's a normal everyday mode when we're not facing a massive further between that we actually focusing on resilience, every core component of then resilience, capacity, and focusing on our everyday stressors. Also, I mentioned before the rejecting of the cookie cutter, to stop treating everybody the same. We have really gotten away from case studies and the idea of best practices. Instead, we're saying we're recognizing based on certain sets of circumstances, political circumstances, financial circumstances, geographical circumstances, that this worked for this community. But here are the challenges that they had in each of these areas. Here are the things that they would change, and here are some of the recommendations that they would make for an area that maybe doesn't have that same political support or same amount of financial support. So we're taking into account the uniqueness of the communities and the people who make up those communities, and saying there is no one size that fits all. Case studies aren't helping us in a lot of ways. They're providing some examples of things that can happen, but we really need to be translating them into how they can functionally happen in so many other areas. And then moving into integration. And I think I put integration for now because we're looking at really changing the internal structures of government. And so integration into our existing capital improvement budgets, integration into our existing planning efforts, integration into what we have right now, but at the same time actually trying to shift away from what we have. The idea of creating plans and just having another plan generated after that plan, creating a set of metrics, but not having anybody to actually implement so we can actually test if something's working. Having just a pilot program rather than something that we're actually replicating over and over and over to test in other areas. So we're really trying to get out of the norm and think about how can government really shift and change? How can we start to get away from that? And that's why integration is something we're doing simultaneously, but we're trying to break down the internal systems at the same time. And that gets to the kind of core of the USDN work, which is the shifting of power. We're asking in every single part of what we're doing now, how has power showed up traditionally? How does power show up right now? Where are different layers of power? And how can we shift power as part of this process? Instead of just having content in our plans or saying we're having an equity lens or an equity chapter or a resilience lens or an adaptation chapter, it actually needs to get beyond the content and more into the process. So we're focusing a lot on getting out of the plans and sort of these pilot projects, and instead saying, how are we actually looking at shifting power and doing so as part of this holistic process, and then that helps us change government. So I mentioned we're not just a nature-based network, and so unfortunately I don't have, we have an entire online database of all of the solutions that people are tagging as nature-based or green infrastructure solutions. I didn't put all of those together into a slideshow because I think it's more important to get a flavor of the network and the way that we work. and then to understand that we have some gaps and we would love more nature-based solutions, and we're trying to work a bit on that. But we want to get better at it. And I think a lot of what our members are doing is, I'll give a couple examples, is, for example, in Boise, they had their floodplain and channel alteration that happened in 1939, and then it happened again in 1964, and then it happened again in 2016, and essentially just kept creating these massive social equity issues and continue flooding different areas of the city. So what they're focusing now is actually green infrastructure, or increasing resilience and improving quality of life with a green infrastructure, rather than more alteration and hardscaping, looking at different solutions and thinking about the river as their prized piece of land. And so how can they make restoration a key component of what they're doing moving forward? I apologize, I didn't put together pretty pictures for the next slide, but essentially these are some other examples of what our cities are doing. In Cleveland, we have this Riddle Green Partnership and Tree Coalition that's doing a lot of stuff on shifting of power to community groups and community-based organizations for tree plantings. In Boulder, they've been leading a lot of work on trying to do carbon sequestration in soils and thinking about carbon farming. And so they have a carbon farming project that they're working on. We've seen a great collaboration between the city of San Francisco and Marin County, which is north, where Marin has been doing a lot related to sequestering carbon in soil and then spreading compost. And so they're actually taking compost from San Francisco, bringing it up to Marin County, and then using it as part of this soil carbon sequestration in the soil project. I know a lot of you have heard about the DC Green Stormwater Incentives and the Philadelphia Green Infrastructure for Heat work. And in Atlanta, we've had environmental green impact bonds for green stormwater infrastructure. So this is not stuff that's like USDN made sure this happened. It's stuff that USDN has supported through funding and collaboration and innovation and other stuff. And we've brought in other partners to support a lot of this work. Also, Toronto is one of our members, and they just got recognized as a lead in sort of their green roofs and looking at the green roof industry. And so they've been prioritizing this as some of their major work. And we have been trying to support members on some of these high impact practices and things that can be used all over the place. And so I know that there's been a big collaboration with Chicago, and Toronto, Vancouver, and New York in this space. One sort of innovative project that's come out of USDN that does have nature opportunities within cities is our Resilience Hubs work, where we're trying to focus on that shifting of power into community and community-based organizations, and having these trusted community centers that can be used for coordinating communication, distributing resources, meeting the everyday needs and enhancing quality of life, but also having the surrounding area around the building be utilized for elements like growing food, capturing and storing water, thinking about air and air filtration, growth of trees, and other sorts of connectivity, so that it's not just a building, but it's a whole system within a community. And so that's a project that you can see at resilience-hub.org, that we have made something that's public facing so that we can get more and more partners interested in that work and supporting that work. So for us, next steps, we're going to continue to move forward with centering racial equity. We're going to continue to move forward with our members leading the work and determining what we do. We're going to continue to push really hard to change the way that government is structured and the way that government does their work. But we're looking for more connection on nature-based options. I'm doing a lot of my own training in that space. We're trying to get more of our staff to do so. We're trying to be part of networks and other groups like this, so that we can get beyond the sets of recommendations and the checklists that governments usually get in this space, and actually consider the financial needs, the timelines, the getting beyond the traditional cost-benefit analysis and looking at a more comprehensive cost-benefit analysis, so we can make the case to our politicians to take proactive action on nature-based solutions. And this is my contact information. I really appreciate y'all listening to everything happening at USDN.
Thank you, Kristin. I think
Great, Baja, thanks.
We can have maybe one or two questions.
I've got a question.
Sure.
If that's okay. Yeah, hi. Sabrina
Hi.
Drill. I'm with University of California Cooperative Extension in Los Angeles. And I was wondering, and I'm sorry if I missed this in your talk, but do you have some kind of focal area or project related to looking at how improving things like river corridors and nature in cities can be done in such a way that it doesn't incentivize gentrification?
Focus more on prioritizing. He's really loud.
You're breaking up.
But I would say it's less of the way that. Okay. Any better?
Yeah, it's good now.
Okay. I'll just keep talking and hopefully you can hear me. It is a core component of gentrification is a core component of our racial equity work, and making sure, again, like I was saying, this is integrated into all of our approaches and all of our practices. So some of the core questions that we ask around the process when we're doing any sort of project is, how have we created these inequities? Where have we created these inequities? How do we make sure not to exacerbate? And then one of the main things that we're looking at is a targeted universalism approach, which is from the Haas Institute in Berkeley, which is essentially acknowledging that all needs matter, but we have created disenfranchised communities through our racist policies and practices for decades. So our prioritization of our funding and our resources and our capacity needs to be in those communities, but not at the expense of then creating sort of gentrification. So there's a protection element. I think we're still in the midst of a lot of that right now, because when you get down to the actual implementation, we run into issues with which politician has made a promise here, who financially has this here, and middle level management and directors only have so much control. And so we are trying again to figure out how are we going from individual and sort of plan influence into a more cultural influence, and that's getting sort of equity and gentrification, other things acknowledged at these higher levels.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Kristin. We'll go to the next speaker because we have limited time. So our next speaker is Clare Kazanski, talking about the Nature Conservancy. Hi, Clare.
Good morning, everyone. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Are they coming through? Okay, fantastic. Good morning. My name is Clare Kazanski, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity, grateful to have the opportunity to present to you all and share some of the work that we're doing at the Nature Conservancy and our US-based cities network. Just really high level, our cities network aims to change the relationship between cities and nature so that natural solutions and conservation are recognized as essential components of healthy, just, and climate resilient cities. So that's kind of our driving framing. In particular, we really work to put into place nature-based solutions in cities that equitably serve the needs of people and improve environmental outcomes. So today I want to share a brief overview of our network and then get into some details about projects. And I'm actually going to bring in some colleagues to get into the details of how we're working and kind of what this looks like on the ground in a few of our network cities. And then hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A. So who are we? We are a network, as all the groups in this broader network are, but we really view ourselves as a network in the truest sense of the word. We bring together individuals with really different perspectives and backgrounds and identities and representing different fields, all to support each other, learn from each other, towards our collective goals of having increasing the role that nature and conservation play in justice. We are very connected. We co-create, we collaborate, and kind of what does that look like in terms of people? We have a central core team. There's about 10 of us, and this is where I sit in the Nature Conservancy, and we support kind of the broad network. We facilitate collaboration and connection, and really are geared towards identifying how to increase our network's collective impact. And this team includes people with backgrounds in urban planning and science and equity, justice work, conservation science, so a whole kind of different group of people. We then have our full-time regional staff. We have about 45 staff who are spread across the country. And these are the people who are really leading the work in our city programs, identifying the strategies, building the partnerships, and getting the work done. And you'll hear from a few of them later on. We also have our broader network members, and this includes supporters of our work, both internal to the Nature Conservancy and external. This includes colleagues in our global science team, our state chapter directors and leadership, as well as other conservation staff. We also work really closely with the Center for Whole Communities, and so some of their staff are part of that network as well. And then we work with about 165 partner organizations in all the different cities where we work. And this includes municipal governments, agencies, as well as community-based organizations, environmental justice groups. So real diversity of different partners, both kind of at the US level and then mostly in the cities where we work. So where are we? This is a map of currently where we're working. We're working in 20 cities across the US. The lighter orange cities are those that we have been working in but have recently pulled out for some capacity reasons. So that includes Boston, Birmingham, Dallas, and Austin. Although Dallas is still wrapping up, and we're going to hear more about that work later today. In addition to this network and connection between people, we also serve as a resource. We've developed multiple publications in partnership with others to offer guidance for practitioners working in conservation in cities. We also do a lot of convening, both across our whole network, and then we do work with our network members. We have a racial equity leadership lab to build capacity there. We work as fundraisers. We also work as funders. So we have a whole body of work where we're funneling resources to mostly community-based organizations in the cities that we work, trying to build their capacity by shifting money and moving money into communities. So wanted to highlight kind of our guiding principles, our vision, our mission, and our goals. Our vision is to advance systemic change through our belief that justice and equity are central to conservation and imperative to sustainable paths forward. And our mission then is to implement nature-based solutions to these pressing challenges in cities in ways that equitably serve the needs of people and improve environmental conditions while advancing knowledge and practice in the field of urban conservation. And our goals then are to achieve collective impact. This is really, as our network is growing over the last several years since starting, this is increasingly kind of where we're trying to lean into and identify opportunities. So how do we achieve collective impact and also facilitate collaboration, advance research, and achieve policy solutions? So at a network level, kind of across that whole picture, we work in several different ways. First and foremost, we're really focused on building a culture that is inclusive, that centers equity and justice that's focused on collaboration and process, and kind of how do we build equitable processes in order to achieve the equitable outcomes that we seek. We're very relationship-based, both internally and in all of our work with our partners. We do a lot of coordination and convening, and that's a way that we try to facilitate cross-pollination across programs, sharing ideas, learning, and really co-creating the work. And then we also work through incentives and investments, again, in partnership and capacity building, but as I mentioned before, also in kind of moving money and increasing capacity with partners in that way. So I want to put this quote up. This is one that we come back to often in the network. Cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they're created by everybody. So this is kind of sums up some of our approach to our process. So I've kind of breezed through kind of big picture, who we are, how we approach things. I really want to have some time for my colleagues to share kind of what that looks like. So want to kind of shift into our projects and kind of how we actually do this work, what it looks like on the ground. And I'll just note that across the board, in all of our programs, we use a lot of science and monitoring. Partnership is key to what we do. We work in policy and with community-based groups, and we have our hands in the ground getting things implemented as well. So you'll get a flavor of that from the examples. Before diving into those examples, I just wanted to kind of get into a little bit more detail with this map I shared. So you'll see that we have 3 main themes where we work. So managing urban water, transforming the city landscape, which is kind of a deep greening strategy, and then improving heat and air quality. So these are kind of the themes for the nature-based solutions work that we do and the strategies that we pursue. And you can just see, based on the colors on this map, that across our network cities, we have multiple projects that are focusing on these different outcomes. So with that, I'm going to actually introduce my colleague, Anna Bettis, who's joining us from Phoenix. And she's going to share an example of what this looks like in our Phoenix program. So Anna, I'll keep advancing slides, but I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Claire. Hello, everyone. So as Claire mentioned, I am with the Phoenix program. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what our work looks like here. For our community, extreme heat and air quality are 2 big challenges. In Phoenix, we're situated in the hottest metro area in the country, and so heat is a real challenge. We're also ranked by the American Lung Association as 7th in terms of ozone pollution, so air quality is another one. We've had over 1,000 people die in the county that we're in over the last decade, and thousands more suffering heat-related illnesses. So rising temperatures and air quality challenges, they impact our health, safety, comfort, and economy. And so we felt it was very important for our program to focus on that. You can advance, Claire. So I mentioned some of the challenges with heat, and extreme heat affects all of us who live here in the Valley, but underserved communities are impacted most. On some days, there is as much as a 13-degree difference in temperature between neighborhoods that are just 2 miles apart in Phoenix. And that study was actually about a heat wave. So that can make a big difference. Just a little bit about the context. There's a couple of maps here. On the left side, you see land surface temperature. And those dark red areas are the places that it's hottest. So there's kind of an L shape across that map that you might notice. And on the right side is tree canopy cover, and the light green are the places with the lowest tree canopy cover. So we noticed in looking at this that the hottest places also had the lowest tree canopy. If you want to advance, please, Claire. So you've already seen this map on the left. And the other one should be appearing. Here we go. On the right side, this is the percentage of child poverty, and the dark blue areas are the places with the highest child poverty. So we saw that not only are the places that are the hottest, the ones with the lowest tree canopy, but they're also the places with the highest child poverty. And so for our program in Phoenix, we really are focused on the areas in our community where those issues intersect. If you can go forward, Claire. And so to address these challenges, our goal for our program is by 2030 to achieve at least a 15% tree canopy cover in all underserved communities, here to reduce heat and improve air quality for people, nature, and the economy. Just to give you an idea of where we're starting, in some places in Phoenix, the tree canopy cover is as little as 6%, and then in some other villages, it's already over 18%. So there's some real disparities. If you want to go forward, Claire. And so I'll quickly go over some strategies for how we are working to achieve this goal. It's a big goal and we can't do it alone, and working on that is going to take strategic partnerships with many organizations and working at different levels. So more on the grassroots level, we partner with community-based organizations with trusted relationships in the community. So you can see in this photo here, this is an example of a community greening project, demonstration project that we did that brings trees and vegetation to one of the hottest communities in Phoenix. And it was important that the site that we worked on was a place that residents actually identified as a hotspot where they experienced difficulty with heat in their community. And we see these community demonstration projects as really a platform to be able to talk about the importance of nature-based solutions and the power of nature-based solutions. We can get a lot of media attention for these, so it can kind of give us a platform and opportunity to share. For example, that project alone, we had a story, we were featured in stories in the Washington Post, in Univision, a Spanish news channel, and locally here, Arizona Republic, Channel 12. So it's a great way for us to really spread awareness. And so I would say that's an example of that first strategy, making the case for nature-based solutions. So I mentioned we're working at multiple levels, but we're also working with the business and development community. So an example of what that looks like for us here is we've just commissioned an economic assessment to look at the current and future cost associated with urban heat and ambient air pollution in Greater Phoenix, which will look at 2020, 2030, and 2050. And that study will also quantify the costs and benefits of applying different mitigation and adaptation strategies. So that's one way that we're executing on that second strategy there of developing the science and tools to inform policies and plans. And then lastly, we're also working to build the capacity of communities to adapt to urban heat and improve air quality. So we've heard from residents in these communities that are disproportionately impacted by urban heat that they might not be aware of the role that nature can play in reducing heat and improving quality of life. They might not have access to the resources needed to advocate for solutions, and they might not feel empowered to bring about change. And we also heard from the city that, they are hearing often from those very well-resourced neighborhoods about what their needs are, but often they are not hearing from the communities who could benefit most from, more trees and vegetation. And so we've designed an Urban Heat Leadership Academy to really equip residents of these communities with the knowledge, resources, and skills to advocate for solutions to urban heat and air quality. So we do a lot of things with those, some examples there. And with that, I am done with my portion. I'm going to hand it off to Kathy, who's working in Dallas, to talk about her work. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Anna. I think we have time.
I think I'm muted. Am I okay now?
You're back on. Yes, we can hear you now, Kathy.
Thank you. Okay, my name is Kathy Jack. Thanks, Anna. And I'm the Dallas Healthy Cities Program Director for the Nature Conservancy, and I'm very grateful to share with you a specific two-part project that's near and dear to my heart, and also I think reflects well how we work in Dallas and in other cities. There's one component of the project, the Green Stormwater Flooding Analysis, that's really a citywide, broad-scale enabling conditions science piece, and then the other piece is a demonstration project that's on the ground, neighborhood-based, using nature-based solutions for community health and resilience. Next slide. Go ahead, Claire. Okay, so for some context, Dallas, like maybe perhaps some of your other urbanized environments, and the entire Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is rapidly urbanizing. We're losing natural land cover quickly to impervious surfaces, with implications for water quality and for flooding. Go ahead and click. In fact, Dallas is really challenged by flooding, and increasingly we're seeing particularly challenges with neighborhood level flooding, flash flooding, and regional climate models are predicting an increase in frequency and intensity of rain events that we think will make all of these neighborhood problems even more extreme. Next slide. So in our region, we do have some developers and local governments who recognize the value that green stormwater infrastructure can play for mostly water quality benefits, but we haven't had widespread systematic adoption of these practices. We certainly don't have comprehensive policy, and we are lacking the understanding, especially among the investors and developers, of the capacity that these infrastructure projects can play with flooding. So that's where we entered. Next slide. We have been partnered for some time with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. In fact, Dr. Fuad Jabber there is a regional expert on green stormwater infrastructure, and he proposed a citywide analysis that would help to gather some of this flooding-based data. And the idea is to identify those areas spatially throughout the city where green stormwater infrastructure is where gray stormwater infrastructure is undersized, and where green stormwater infrastructure can enhance from a flood perspective, and considering both technical and cost benefits. Next slide. From the beginning, we've been very closely partnered with the City of Dallas, and in particular, Dallas Water Utilities and the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability, who manage different both flooding and water quality components for stormwater. And this project has been formally adopted as a part of the city's resiliency plan. And go ahead, the next one, the Comprehensive Environmental Climate Action Plan. So that's a big win, and it kind of reflects how collaboratively we have worked with the city to integrate some of these solutions, even in the wording in some of these policies. Next slide. So I'm going to quickly walk through these three components of the study. It's very technical. I'll try to keep it interesting. And I'm going to use 5 Mile Creek Watershed. Go ahead and click here at the southern end of the city to give you a flavor and a snapshot of the analysis components. Go ahead and move on. Part 1 is about identifying where the flooding hotspots are in the city. And for this analysis, we're really speaking about the limitations of the gray stormwater system. Go ahead and click both of them. I have all of these animations that are hard to manage from afar. So the first part here is we've modeled for several design storms and under current and then future climate change scenarios, where are we seeing overflown stormwater inlets? So that's what this image is representing. And we have lots and lots. This is one watershed. We've done this for all of the watersheds in the city and several design storms. Then we want to rank them by severity of flooding. And then we go ahead and click and show the next slide, the next map. Then we back out and we look at the contributing watersheds that are leading to these overflown junctions, because that's where we're going to start to dig deeper and look for some opportunity. Next slide. And that's where we go with part 2, which includes some engineering and spatial analysis. So part 2, and just click through them, keep clicking. Part 2, we really have to look at which green stormwater infrastructure systems are we going to include in the model. We limited it to rain gardens, rainwater harvesting catchment, and bioretention. And we have established sort of design criteria. Every rain garden in this model will meet these, will look a certain way. Every rainwater cistern is 1,000 gallons. Bioretention has the most flexibility. And we have started with each watershed for the 100-year current conditions design storm, identified exactly what is the volume we estimate that we want to address with green and gray infrastructure. So for 5 Mile, we have 153 million cubic feet of overflow volume that we're hoping to address. And then we start to look at those sub-watersheds for opportunity. Next slide. So that's requiring us to do a spatial assessment. We're still finalizing our rules. In this first pass with preliminary findings, we use certain rules, but we're running this through a technical review committee and making adjustments, where we're then looking at the surface space and area. Where can we, in these opportunities, these overflown sub-watersheds, where do we actually have the most opportunity for green interventions? And then we're modeling how much basically volume in each location can be captured. And our preliminary findings, go ahead and click, are showing that we have substantial opportunity for green stormwater to be deployed in every overflown watershed. And in fact, it's more cost effective in each watershed we've modeled. Green stormwater infrastructure is more cost effective on a per volume basis compared to gray. But also in most of these watersheds, we need both together to achieve even close to 100%, and often we can't achieve 100% reduction. So the findings so far for this piece are really supporting that for anywhere we're looking at capital investment for stormwater management, we should be including green stormwater. Next slide. But as we all know, budgets in cities and at the citywide scale, and then also for developers, are limited. So we've been asked to also take this data and look at where we can encourage first investment, priority investment. From a hydrological perspective, this map only represents the hydrology and the costs associated. We have weighted 3 different layers for this type of a priority: flooding severity, and the maximum potential opportunity for green stormwater, and then cost efficiency. Then the intention is to take this layer and it will be integrated with a decision support tool developed by our partners at the Trust for Public Land and considered together with equity layers, social, demographic, all sorts of planning objectives that are already pre-populated in that tool. And that's how we intend this data to be used in the next phase. And then finally, next slide. Just a quick mention to how this science lands on the ground, which is equally important to our work, because we need to be able to develop these on-the-ground benefits and study them and create models with our conservation partners, our local government partners, but most importantly, our neighborhood and community organization partners. So what we did is we took this grant that we had to demonstrate the value and effectiveness of a green stormwater system, and we integrated it into a community pocket park that's being developed by our partners at the Trust for Public Land in partnership with Four Oak Cliff, a community-based organization. And they have done a beautiful job designing a park that reflects community values. And the green stormwater infrastructure system, by being a part of that design process, has really reflected some of this community design choices and also begun a relationship and the educational opportunity there with the community. So with that, I'd like to turn it over now for the next portion of the presentation to Chris Hawkins, who leads our urban conservation work in Denver.
So, and actually, this is Claire again. I'm going to chime back in with, I think with our timing shift, I think unfortunately we probably don't have time for Chris to share a couple thoughts. Is that true?
Oh, no.
If everyone's okay, I think if everyone can stay for a few minutes, or anyone who can stay, I think it's okay. But maybe can you make it quick to respect everyone's time? Thank you. Clear? Yeah.
Chris, do you want to chime in? We could also maybe just share a couple high-level points. Is Chris there? All right. Well, I'm not hearing Chris. So he had a quick kind of lightning talk style that he was going to share. So since he's not chiming in, I'll just put up contact information for all of us. So please feel free to follow up. Hopefully the work that Anna and Kathy shared gives you a snapshot of kind of what this looks like and how our programs function across the network, given the different challenges and opportunities and relationships that exist in different places. So feel free to reach out. We'd love to share more, and I'd be happy to connect people to some of our partners and some of our staff working in specific cities or on specific topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That was excellent.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Anna. I think Christopher's here, but I think he's having some microphone issue or something. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Due to the time, we will end here, and please contact us or the presenters if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire and team. It's really excellent.
Thank
Impressed
you
with
so
the
much.
tag team. Very impressed.
Yeah.